Hey, what's going on, friends? My name is Rich. Welcome to Crash Course Hobbies, the channel where I give you quick and dirty explanations on how to get you where you want to go in your hobby journey. Today we're starting at the most basic first steps into getting into building and painting plastic kits or Warhammer or Conquest or whatever you want to do, and that is assembly. Now there's 5 tools that are pretty essential to getting started, and so I want to make sure I cover those for you guys in this video, and then as part of a multi-part series we'll get into everything you need to paint as well as basic techniques and all that kind of stuff in other videos. But for now we're going to talk about strictly the 5 most essential items you need to assemble your plastic kits. The first thing you're going to need is models. Now there's a lot of different ways you can go about purchasing your kits. Now obviously I always recommend going to your friendly local game store and purchasing from them because it helps support and keep them in business, gives you and everybody else in the community a safe place to gather and play. So always do that whenever possible. Now, one thing to keep in mind that a lot of people don't know when getting into the hobby, especially when it pertains to Games Workshop, is they actually give retailers a 20% discount on their stuff. So if you were to go and purchase, say, this Combat Patrol from Games Workshop, it's gonna run you like 150 bucks. Although typically from a reseller, it's gonna be like between 120 to whatever it might be based on their markup. So like even Amazon gets that. So like this box on Amazon's like 127 bucks. Now, again, I would recommend not purchasing from Amazon, even though that it's kind of counterintuitive for a YouTuber to say that because it goes against affiliate money and all that kind of stuff I could get. But really, supporting those game stores when you can is super important. But if you can't find it there and you want to order either from a different game store online, again, a lot of these hobby stores have eBay storefronts that they sell from that you can get that discount. Amazon, like I said, or just going into the brick and mortar store. And even if it's a little bit more, sometimes from them, still tends to be cheaper than direct from Games Workshop, and you're supporting the store. So it's really important to do. Now, if you are brand new into the hobby, specifically talking about Warhammer, there are a couple of ways that you can get started with your plastic kits. They have Combat Patrol boxes like these. If you're looking at Age of Sigmar, you've got your Start Collecting boxes or the newer Vanguard boxes. And these typically will give you a character, maybe a vehicle, and a couple of squads of troops, typically around 500 points, which is enough to get you going. And it tends to be a little bit better value than if you were to just purchase a single box of guys. But if you're kind of wanting to dip your toes in and you're not sure if the hobby is for you, then definitely just picking up a regular 10-man squad of Space Marines or something like that is going to be a little bit more cost-effective way to just try it out. Also, a lot of Games Workshop stores, if you have one in your area, will give you a free model. So you could go in and just get a single free Age of Sigmar or 40K model, whichever one they have at the time, and that way you can just try it out. So once you've got your model kit, first thing you're gonna need is a good pair of hobby snips. You can pick these up in like super cheap hobby starting kits on Amazon for like $10. I'll link some different options for you down below. But something like this, the whole purpose is it's just gonna snip the plastic part off of the sprue that all these models come in. You can get other manufacturers, like this one from Monument Hobbies is a nice solid one for kind of middle range price point, or you can get something like these God Hands, which are kind of considered to be the top tier hobby clippers. They're a little bit more expensive, but they give you a flusher snip off of the piece, so it just ends up giving you less cleanup later to deal with. Now, speaking of cleanup, the next thing you're going to want to get is just some kind of hobby knife, X-Acto knife, razor blade, something like that. Typically you'll use this a lot for scraping mold lines. So the way that these plastic parts are formed is, in the mold, they've got 2 halves that go together. They inject the plastic in, and typically this leaves just a little line that runs kind of like a faint hairline piece of plastic. And a lot of times it's not as noticeable, but sometimes on like a cape or a chest piece or something like that, you might want to file that down. So you could use the back of a razor blade. Sometimes I'll use a blunted X-Acto and just scrape that off. You'll also use these all the time for various things, cutting up bits and stuff like that. So it's always good to have a good hobby knife. I like this one from Monument just because it has the safety thing there so that you don't have to worry about cutting yourself, but really any X-Acto blade will do. So once you've got your pieces clipped out and cleaned up, ready to go, you gotta glue them together. Now this is something that I think a lot of people just assume getting into it if you have no other prior knowledge that super glue is what you need and that's the way to go. When in fact, what you really want to get is some plastic cement. You can get, pretty much every hobby brand has their own. So you could get the Citadel stuff, you could get the Monument Hobby stuff, you could get the Tamiya Extra Thin, which is what I would recommend. But the whole point of the plastic cement is that it actually seeps into the cracks, it melts the plastic and physically like welds it together into a single piece. So it creates a better bond, and it also is a lot better for down the line things like stripping the model. If you repaint it later, all these different things. Doesn't really affect it as much as it would if it was super glue. And super glue tends to be chunkier, leaves a chalky residue, and overall just more brittle than if you go the plastic glue route. And I promise you, if you start with super glue and then you get into using the plastic glue later, you will wonder why you ever use super glue, because it's that much better. So just start out with the cheap $9 bottle of Tamiya Extra Thin. It's definitely worth it when you're putting together expensive Warhammer plastic kits anyway. And lastly, it's a super little silly thing, but it makes a world of difference, is a little foam plastic sanding stick. Now, you'd want to get these in a very fine grit because these models are small, and hogging away a ton of material with a big grit sandpaper is not what you want. Something very, very fine. But the nice thing about the foam sanding sticks is that because they're so pliable, you can put them on something like a Space Marine shoulder pad or a more rounded bit or something that's hard to get to with a hobby knife, and it just bends in there and can file off those mold lines. Or if you have a bit of the sprue that got cut at a weird angle and you're having trouble getting it with the hobby knife, you can just file it down with your plastic sanding or your foam sanding stick, and it makes a big difference. So anyways, guys, that's it for just the 5 essential things you need to get started with building your own plastic kits. Again, I'll have links down in the description for you, and of course, support your local game stores when you can. And like I said, I'll have more videos on painting supplies as well as basic techniques and things to get started farther into your hobby journey. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.